So, welcome, ladies. Thank you for being here for this, I think, incredibly important life affirming conversation. Because in discovering what's actually going on and in discovering on what is happening and how it is intended to impact each and every single one of us, what you're saying is that you're willing to look the beast in the eye and actually notice that it is happening, and how you navigate it is of critical importance. So this is what this conversation today is going to be about. This is about discovering what is this notion called biodigital convergence and how it's intended to impact you. And it's going to end with a conversation around that it doesn't have to go in the way that the government, for example, and the global institutions are suggesting it must go. So my name's Stella Moresi. I am a certified code model coach. I'm the guardian of the vision of the Well Systems Institute. It is the paradigm from which I operate from. I love deep, meaningful, expansive conversations about what we are as human beings. My personal journey has taken me to this point where understanding, viscerally grokking, the power of mindset has become the most important thing in my life. And so I create conversations and experiences for women that are seeking to expand their mindset, to get to know themselves better. And how interesting that that's the very thing that this biodigital convergence thing is seeking to redefine. A little bit about how I have chosen to structure this conversation or this presentation. My intention here is to educate you as to what I see is going on, what has been explicitly stated is going on. And I will start this conversation with what's the dream? Right. So what's the reality that they're seeking to, how is it that they're seeking to create this reality? So what are they selling it to us as? So what's the commercial version of this thing? And then I'm going to delve into a little bit about what's the reality and what are the implications of all of this. So throughout the presentation, I will be asking some questions that are different than the questions that the federal government and other institutions are seeking to indoctrinate us with. So I will ask some different questions to help you expand your context of what it is that's actually going on here. And ultimately, we will end this conversation or this presentation with that fork in the road moment, because this is what we could say is coming. I believe has already been here for quite some time, since, the beginning of 2020, quite possibly, where we have been put in a position where we've got to make some choices. Do I choose to go in the conventional story? Do I choose to go down the path of the conventional story, or am I going to mindfully and intentionally choose not that, but an alternative story, an alternative creation of my own choosing because it's meaningful to me? So for those of us here who are long in the tooth in the well systems paradigm, who will you choose to become is such a critical, fundamental question, because it guides us toward that which is meaningful for us. So let's delve in for a moment here and explore what is biodigital convergence. So this is the name that the federal government has given to this not only mindset, but also an ideology, but also how they're seeking to move and to normalize this thing that seeks to join biology and technology to form a new human, and form a new human within a new environment. So what they're looking, and you'll see throughout my presentation, that they're seeking to redefine everything. My focus on this presentation is on two of the most recent reports that they have shared with us publicly. And so they're interchangeable, and I will share the resources with you at the end of this. So you'll see a little screenshot there that says what this will impact. So food, our health, the environment, security, as well as manufacturing. So everything. So this is intended to impact the way that we do everything. So from the World Economic Forum perspective, this is now the fourth industrial revolution. So we're leaving what was behind and we're moving into this new revolution, this new way of being in this planet. So what's the world that they foresee? So this is the foreword to the Biodigital Convergence report. And this lady, and we'll talk about her in just a moment, she's been hired to lead this group and to lead what's actually going on. And you see here that she's speaking to why this matters. So biological and digital systems are converging. So converging and merging to change the way that we work, live, and evolve as a species. So the very essence of what we are as species is now up for grabs. So more than technological change, this thing called biodigital convergence may transform the way we understand ourselves and cause us to redefine, and this is so critical, what we consider human or natural. So the very essence of the nature of existence is now up for grabs. So this lady who is leading the Policy Horizons Canada initiative has been working for the World Economic Forum for 20 years. And so she is a byproduct of their mindset, of their ideology, of what they're seeking to create in the global sphere. And so as far as I can tell from my personal perspective is that her job in the Canadian government is to manifest the reality that the World Economic Forum is seeking to manifest. And you'll see some names down there like Trudeau and Singh and Freeland. They're all part of our current government makeup, and they've all come out of the World Economic Forum Young Leaders initiative. So the place where they shape and create national and international leaders. So Edi Rama from Albania and Macron from France. And just like if you go on their to see who they've actually produced, it's like they've infiltrated hundreds of national governments worldwide. This is important to pay attention to because what the World Economic Forum is seeking to do is create, and they're telling you, this is straight a screenshot from their website. They're seeking to create a space for global governance. So they're saying that we, unelected people who are made up of your national governments that we've infiltrated, of billionaires, of people who have power to influence worldviews and how we live, we will now take over as the global leaders of the world and tell you how you should live. And, if you're noticing what's happening with the World Economic Forum, with the World Health Organization now, they now have power over a global narrative. You begin to notice that these unelected institutions are beginning to have power and control over national issues. So this is really important to keep in mind. What is biodigital convergence? Because it's a very interesting term that they chose. So the way that they're defining it in the report is the following. Digital and biological systems are beginning to combine and merge in ways that are profoundly disruptive to our assumptions about society, the economy, and our body. We call this biodigital convergence. So this is so critical, this profoundly disruptive to our assumptions. I want you to pay attention to that because in a moment, we'll talk about vitalism and we'll talk about the presuppositions of what it means to be biological and organic, or machine. So another screenshot, this is from the World Economic Forum, where they're speaking to the same thing using slightly different language. They're calling this the fourth industrial revolution. And what they're saying is that it's a fundamental change in the way we create, exchange, and distribute value. It's a technological shift, merging our physical, digital, and biological worlds into one. So this is the three different ways, and I don't really want to get into this one right now, where they're talking about how biodigital convergence is going to happen. So they're speaking to full integration of biological and digital entities, so human bodies with things like, say, Neuralink. They're speaking to the coevolution of biodigital and digital technologies, where an advancement in one field supposedly will impact an advancement in another. So if there's an advancement in technology and it's our bodies have been infiltrated by that, then our bodies will somehow be better. And then also this conceptual convergence of biological and digital. And this is critical, because if there's a conceptual convergence, then what we do is we accept it as a normal thing to do. Oh, so this little the breakthrough in AI thing is that, and I don't know which direction this is taking, so we'll talk a little bit about that, and I welcome your curiosities around this, because it's like, is it humans that are being used to, is it that we're enhancing human capabilities, as we'll see in a second, or is it that we're enhancing AI capabilities using humans? So if you notice that line there, they're using human brains as ideal hardware for artificial intelligence. As far as I'm concerned, if the body is the hardware and there's a software, the question becomes, which software do I choose to download from? So artificial intelligence is one perspective, and God self is another perspective. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. I like this. So this is where you might pick up on my level of sarcasm. This is the dream. This is quite literally, I pulled the screenshots out from what they're describing on the report as an ideal scenario. Now, I have my own perspective about this, and you have yours. So just notice if this is your ideal perspective or not. Let's find out. I wake up to the sunlight and salty coastal air of the Adriatic Sea. I don't live anywhere near the Mediterranean, but my AI, which is also my health advisor, has prescribed a specific air quality, scent, and solar intensity to manage my energy levels in the morning, and has programmed my bedroom to mimic this climate. So I read this and my heart starts palpitating. There's so many presuppositions here and so many things to unpack. I don't live near the Adriatic Sea. So where do I live? Where is my physical body if it's not in the there that the AI has programmed? So where do I live? And who tells my AI what it is that I would like to experience that day? Another thing is that, of course, my sheets, are always fresh, and I check some things and I send a brain message. So the presupposition is that I now have an implant that can send a brain message to open an app that controls my insulin levels and make sure that my pancreas is optimally supported. I can't imagine having to inject myself with the needles like my mother did when she was a child. Now it's a microbe transplant that auto adjusts and reports on my levels. So my internal state of what might be happening with my body becomes completely irrelevant, and everything has now been hijacked by what AI thinks I need, including medication. I would pay attention to that in a world where the vast majority of women already are hyper-medicated. So in Canada for depression, and in the United States for antipsychotics. Women are the ones that are the most medicated. So here we go. Now this person moves on to check their digital interference and dream data. And the therapy app analyzes their emotional responses that they expressed while sleeping. It suggests that I take time to be in nature this week and reflect on my recurring trapped in a box dream and enhance, helpful subconscious neural activity. My AI recommends a forest day. I think okay, and my AI and neural implant do the rest. So let's unpack this one for a moment because I love this example. I love that they chose to use this example because I do not live anywhere near the Mediterranean. I am not in a forest. I'm having a trapped in a box dream that won't leave me alone. So I figure this is a very accurate representation of what this world could look like. So if I'm trapped in a box in my dream, am I trapped in a box in reality? Where is my physical body? If I'm not in the forest, if I'm not actually taking a walk outside, where is my physical body? This is a great one because, you're waking up to climate controlled, and already we've seen in Italy and in England where they're changing the temperature that we're allowed to keep our houses at. And as we start to incorporate smart homes into our daily lives and programmable thermostats, and someone else begins to control those thermostats, what's happening is that then we will maybe not be allowed to actually program our own homes in terms of the climate that we find comfortable. So all of this, blah, 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 and then it leads to, I check my carbon offset measure to see how much credit I will receive from my home's contribution to the government's climate change mitigation program. So it presupposes all the narratives that we're now being fed around climate change in terms of there is a carbon offset and I'm responsible. No way to manage it other than the government being able to tell us what's appropriate and what isn't. So, oh man, you begin to link those with all the different things that we're implementing, like CBDCs, programmable money, for example, and you begin to notice that there's many links here that are not exactly intended for our own good. So let's keep going. Remember, this is still the utopia. This is still the good stuff. I'm brushing my teeth, and now my personal AI reminds me to have a drone pick up my daughter's baby tooth because the epigenetic markers on the tooth have to be analyzed and cataloged for genetic blockchain in order to qualify for the open health rebate. So I need to do that in order to be able to qualify. So I have to now give the government and its partners, the corporate partners, access to my child's genetic and epigenetic markers so that they can determine whether or not I get health care. This is a really important conversation because what if I don't? What if I choose not that? Will I still have access to open health rebate? Will my child? At this point, I now go and I take my supplement that's been printed out of my bioprinter, which you can now get for around $1,500. And this is indicative of what do I need. So this tells me what I need, and it takes my data every single day and it sends it out to be analyzed for tomorrow's supplement. So very narrow, small, what's the word? Oof, I'm blanking on the word, but very, very small perception of what health is. Holistic health is nowhere near the vicinity, as you can probably tell at this point here. It's very much day-to-day, data-driven, daily information that feeds the body with short-term solutions. So it monitors real-time triglycerides, and it all depends on my genetic markers. So this is predicated on a mindset that genetics shape our health, which has been proven time and again to be false information but we continue to replicate it. All right, this is the last one in the utopian world there that I chose, and there's more, so go to the report and read the rest of it, see what happens. This is where now I strap into my virtual meeting in my skeletal muscular strength chair. I don't know what that is. I lean back and I log in and I think I have this moment of deep thought where I think, wow, look how intimately we're all connected in this digital biosphere. So my contact to humanity is minimal, but look how deeply I'm connected to and through my AI to yours. This is again directly taken from the report, and they're suggesting that this may sound far-fetched. To me, it does not sound far-fetched at all. It sounds exactly like the world that they're seeking to create and telling us, normalizing this world that they're seeking to create. What's important here to notice is that the technologies that mention everything that they've been talking about here already exist. They have not yet been implemented in that way yet, but they already exist. And if they exist, they're here to be used. So it's really critical. Look at this. We're outlining these radical shifts that could take place within an optimistic biodigital future. So if that's their version of optimistic, what's the version of pessimistic? And maybe even better question, what's the version of realistic? I love this quote, and I keep sharing it because it's so critical. Technological progress is like an axe in the hands of a pathological criminal. This was said by Albert Einstein, who lived through the atomic bomb era. And if you guys watch the Oppenheimer movie, it ended with, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." So if we give our power away to these pathological criminals, and if you live in this world and you don't think that our governments, that our healthcare system, that our institutions, that are all these things are not pathological criminals, I mean, I don't know what to say, because like wealth disparities increasing, people are constantly bombarded with misinformation and ways to actually take us away from ourselves. We have criminal cases, quite literally. What the federal government did with the truckers' convoy has been determined in a court of law to have been illegal. So there's so much evidence, and I don't really want to go into the evidence. You either know this to be true or you don't. And if you know this to be true, you're probably in this conversation. So I want to talk a little bit now about the manipulations that are happening in order to make the dream manifest. In the report, and there's somewhere in the World Economic Forum too, where they mentioned this, like they mentioned that this is going to be disruptive. This is not going to be an easy thing that we just like slide into. This is going to be disruptive to our way of life. And you and I, living in today's world, are going to be the people from which the transition is happening. So it's going to be worse because we're the ones moving through what was into what is, and transitions are always challenging. So they're telling us it's going to be disruptive. And what we're looking at is a change in all of these different things that I mentioned at the beginning. So quite literally everything. So these are some of the questions that they pose in the report. And if you notice, so for those of you that are in the well systems paradigm, you might notice that they're all what and how questions. So they're very low in the structure of thought in terms of how do we make this happen, and what are the things that we need to make sure, what are the behaviors that we need to modify, what are these things that we need to actually implement down here, which presupposes there's a why. There's a why this is happening, and they're not questioning the why this is happening. They're presupposing it and feeding it to us so that we consume it as this is the way forward. So if you're familiar with the structure of thought, great. If you're not familiar with the structure of thought, I invite you to get familiar, because if you don't understand the predictable structure of thinking, the predictable structure of your own mind, what ends up happening is you become victim to the narrative that perpetuates fear, because you're left with Oh my God, how do I navigate this? Oh my God, what do I need to do? I don't know what to do. And so if you were part of the COVID shenanigans where a lot of people were seeking to do, what do I do, right? They moved countries and they built bunkers and they sought to escape at the environment behavior level. So very low on logical levels. It's really hard to influence change at that level. And you cannot escape an ideology. You cannot escape the collective moving in a particular direction. It doesn't matter where you go. And what has been proven through this global governance initiative is that there's nowhere to go. It is a worldwide intervention. It is a worldwide thing that's happening. And so there's nowhere for you to go. And it's targeting Western nations. It's targeting Western ideology. And it's doing that at a time when the baby boomers are leaving. So it's targeting people who have grown up with and live with and only know a life with technology. So it's easier to normalize what's happening to those people. So I'm not going to delve into the structure of thought too much today, but I did want to mention it because it's such a critical tool to begin to use in moments when you feel trapped potentially, or before then, so that you understand what's actually going on. I will share some resources around this to help you understand what this is and how it works, but I won't do that now. So in conclusion, the report says that we could be on the cusp to this long-term biodigital transformation of absolutely everything in our life. So could be, very quickly, in the next report, sent 2 years later, turned to, we are in the midst of this thing. So I want you to, during this report, so down here, we lived through the first global emergency of the biodigital era. Lived past tense. In their mind, in their telling us, in their creations, this has already happened. So I want you to really note that we went from could be to now is. So we're already in the midst of this biodigital era. And this report, the second one, then this one's called Biodigital Today and Tomorrow. In this report, what they're doing is they're saying that public health has to be at the center of national governance. So let me repeat that. Public health has to be at the center of national governance. So let's keep going. In the same report, they unveil how the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated this transition. And through this COVID-19 pandemic, we discovered that there are risks of the misinformation. And of course, the people that were in this narrative giving misinformation were the people that were saying, wait a minute, no, that's not how I see the world. So great. So 99% of scientists agree in a world where censorship has become normalized. But what about the people that don't agree and censorship has become a way of life? What about those people? What about my own internal cues that say, no, I don't think so. I'm choosing not that. So because of the risk of this misinformation, and we'll look at what's actually happening in Canada, I think on the next slide, and how they're pulling this all together through law. Because of that risk, even though, so, okay, sorry, I just had this thought of like, who's spreading misinformation? Because, for example, Fauci recently said, I don't know where the 6 feet thing came from. We just said it. And then, it took root. We don't know how it happened. So who's actually spreading misinformation? It's a great question. However, in this world that they're seeking to create, misinformation is a great risk. And so what they need to do is they need to reevaluate the balance between, are you ready? Biosecurity, biological security, and personal freedoms. So what happened during the pandemic to personal freedoms? We were mocked for suggesting that this is an important element of a free and democratic society. In order to make this biodigital convergence in your reality, the fourth industrial revolution in your reality, the Great Reset in reality, we need social acceptance. So we need people like you and I to agree that this is the way that we're going to move forward. Because the nanosecond that we go, no, this falls apart. So I'm of the mindset that the masses have already made their choice, and that unfortunately it's going to be really challenging to undo the damage that has already been done. And so the question becomes, how do I choose to live in the midst of all of this? So we'll delve into that in just a moment. But it is really important to know that they cannot take from you that which you do not consent to. So this is how they're setting up the stage for the new normal in terms of the laws that they're implementing. And I just pulled a few. I don't know all of them. I don't pretend to know everything that's going on. I know some of the things that are happening to normalize what they're saying they're creating. So Bill C-16, for example, has normalized transgenderism and made it a crime to speak against transgenderism and all that sort of stuff, which, you know, like, if you're a person that does not connect and identify with your body, that makes sense to me that you need the space to be yourself and you make that choice. However, the point of the transgender, it has been hijacked, right? The transgender agenda has been hijacked, and the intentionality behind that is to normalize beyond gender. And when you normalize beyond gender, aka beyond your biology, you're now normalizing beyond biology. So no longer do we need to be a slave to our physical bodies. We can now transcend our physical bodies with heavy reliance on the medical system, but don't worry about that part, because you can transcend your own biology. Bill C-11, this was huge, because what it's doing is it's centralizing the internet. It's taking a free and open space and making it a space that is censored. And so when you begin to censor what's being said on the internet, you're censoring what's available. You're censoring the information that's available. And then when you add mandatory quota that, for example, I'm making this up, I don't know if 10% of all your content has to be government-driven content to fill the quota, or else you don't get to operate in this country. So Facebook is going to do what they're told to do, right? So they're going to fill the feeds with what is legal in the country. And remember, in a global governance world, it becomes mandatory globally. So there's nowhere you could go to actually find, quote unquote, truth from an external source coming in. And I mean, having lived through communist Albania, and censorship was a really big deal, it is how you maintain false consensus, which is what happened during the pandemic as well. Bill C-27, this is a more recent one. It's normalizing against censorship and telling us what is consensus. So they're saying this is what's true and this is what's not true. And what's so very dangerous about this bill is that it's actually seeking to criminalize future crimes. So looking at, seeking to criminalize something that hasn't happened. And in a world where we have princesses having medical interventions for a disease that they don't have because of genetic markers that told her she does have that, we're normalizing that for the world. So we're normalizing future pacing disaster and acting now in such a way that has consequences. It has consequences. And I put in this thing called Digital Safety Commission of Canada, which is coming in through Bill C-27. And these are the people that are going to have enforcement capacity to police our speech on the internet. So these are the people that are going to be sifting through and looking at who are the people that are speaking, quote unquote, truth as per in alignment with the conventional narrative, and people who are not, who are the spreaders of misinformation. So we already had the social experiment with COVID, and now we're normalizing it through law. for me, it's like all of these things are here. You know, the Great Reset is here. It has been here. Own nothing, be happy is here. And we'll talk about the Great Taking in a moment, where they have created laws that allow for the taking of our finances, stocks, bonds, and even homes. So that world is already here. The virtual first, the hashtag of the World Economic Forum, that's already here. Smart cities are already here. Talk to a city planner and notice what kind of cities they're building. Tall, massive buildings with no regard for the consequences on the ground, because the intention is big and tall. You don't live on the ground anymore. You live in your room, remember? CBDCs are now in the research phase, but they've been implemented in Canada in the research phase, but they've been implemented in 11 countries. I might be making that up, but a lot of countries, and they've been tested in a lot of countries, and they failed in one country. I'm not sure. I don't remember which country exactly, but people said, no, I'm not doing this. And so the government stopped doing it. So we have power. AI constructed reality is already here. So half of the content that's now on the internet is AI produced content. That's insane. So where are humans, and where's authenticity? Where is capacity to connect to something far deeper than a artificial reality? So this thing called technocratic interventions, a savior, as I like to call them, are already here. So remember the transhumanist and transgender movement, and AI telling us what we need for lifelong health is already here. The social credit system is already here. And we saw that through the vaccine passports that were implemented in this country, as well as it's been going on for 15 years, I think, in China, in a closed, contained environment where we weren't really allowed to hear what they're doing, and they're not really allowed to hear what we're doing. So genderless society, this normalization that gender is now becoming irrelevant in the world where women still birth, that's being questioned. Biodigital convergence, as we've been speaking, is here, and global governance is here. So all of these things are currently here. So we can choose to ignore what's actually here and, stick our head in the sand, which is fine if that's what you want to do, but this will not go away. So good for you for being here. Small group, but mighty. So what's being sought to be redefined is human. What is human? And this is a paradigm shift about what is human. What is reality? What is nature? And ultimately, who gets to decide? So as they're redefining all these things, you can, should you choose to, stop, pause, and ponder inside yourself any and all of these questions. So there's two, at least, mindsets that I know of, and this is that bifurcation point of choice. This is the choice point now. As the government and World Economic Forum and World Health Organization and all these blah, blah, blahs are creating a narrative about what is a human being, and as they're seeking to convince us of that narrative, that means that we merge with technology. That's what's best for us. That's one perspective. And most people will choose that perspective. Your family members will choose that perspective. People you deeply care about will choose that perspective. So now you stand at a choice point of, do I go along with these people to get along? Or do I stand firmly in a different truth that I get to discover from the internal cues of my body? So in the paradigm that I operate from, becoming internally referenced is critical. And it's critical because what I am is not the body. And this is a spot of where we align, the paradigms align, because we're not the body. The body is a hardware for a software download. So what is that software and where is it coming from? In a quantum world, I know I am a quantum biological being. And when I know that the information that streams through my body is quantum in nature. And it tells me the truth of my experience, because that's the point of the body. The point of the body is to discover that truth. So, don't step in front of a moving train, or, that person's lying, that sort of thing. And so what's happening here, again, the split is around what is the body. The split is a war for the body and a war for the mind, which I'll get to in a second. In the paradigm that they're seeking to reinforce, the body basically is here to carry the brain around. The brain is the centralized space for consciousness, and without the brain, there is no consciousness. So in that world where reductionism is real, and you reduce the full measure of the human experience to the brain, this version of digital nirvana makes sense, right? Because now you just get to be thoughts in an AI cloud forever, right? You don't even need the body. You just get to be in thoughts forever. I mean, who controls the capacity of the thoughts that you can have? Can you evolve in that? Who programs the algorithms? All those sorts of questions are not being pondered, because what's being sold is the dream, not the reality. For me, what I've discovered in my long journey of personal evolution is that without my body, I could not be me. I would not be myself. And so if you took my thoughts and put them into an artificial intelligence chip and allowed those thoughts to take root, all that would be available to me is everything that has been incredibly historical. There's not much space there for discovery and for new information to move, because it's contained in a chip. So I might be able to navigate a map better, but I'm not able to evolve my consciousness. The paradigm shift that's actually happening right now is a shift away from what is called vitalism. So vitalism is the idea, the notion, the perspective, the mindset that living beings are fundamentally different than non-living beings, because we're governed by different principles. You guys will know this example, but it's like, I can put a bunch of stuff in the blender and press the blend button, and the stuff in the blender will merge, right? The biological stuff in there will become a smoothie or whatever, but the blender does not shift, does not change. In a human body, when information moves through the body, literally the body transforms. And when the body transforms, we evolve. And as we evolve, we become more. And as we become more, we have different experiences. This is evolution in process, can only happen through the body. And the very nature of this is now being questioned. So what they're saying is that biology and the inorganic are not that different. This can only happen from a mindset of not enough. So if I believe myself not to be good enough, smart enough, capable enough, it's easy for me to be pulled into this narrative that says you need these heightened capabilities. And particularly because it's going to be sold as for competition in the job market, and for, keeping up with the Joneses, and for keeping up with all that sort of stuff. You will need these heightened capabilities, because person X over here who has Neuralink has access to all of the internet all of the time, and you don't. So it will be sold as something that we need in order to evolve. As we begin to question this, human bodies and senses and all this sort of stuff, for me, the question becomes, what is the role of eugenics? And that is ugly, ugly stuff. Because as we question what a human being is and somebody else gets to redefine it, we might want to notice that it hasn't always been to the populace's advantage. I mean, women didn't have the right to vote until 100 years ago in this country. Men could freely rape in marriage in this country until the 70s. So it's like, and let's not, it's like, and slavery and what we've done to Indigenous communities, and in the notion that they're not people, So if someone has these heightened capabilities inserted into their bodies and I choose not to, at what point does my humanity begin to be illegal? At what point is it that I'm no longer human as per the definition of the government or the international community? Yeah, so I touched on this quite a bit. Actually, I touched on this already, so I'm going to pass this. But basically, in order for this to take root, in order for them to create this version of the promised land that they're seeking to manifest, it really relies on our pain. It relies on fear, and it relies on shame. And there's nothing more powerful than those two tools to ensure collectives comply. And part of that is ignorance. So ignorance about what we are as human beings, ignorance about what this might mean, ignorance about the consequences of giving up our bodies and our minds to the highest bidder, to the highest technocratic bidder. And it's a violation of trust because we're trusting our government, we're trusting the medical system, we're trusting all of these institutions because we believe that they're there to help us. I encourage you to start thinking differently because now is the time. Now is the time to notice what's actually happening and whether or not they're contributing to your life in a meaningful way, particularly given the worldview that they're seeking to manifest. This is also a war for our mind. This is a war for our mind where what's being normalized is utilitarianism. So that's a fancy word for saying basically collective good prioritized over rights and freedoms. Remember, they already told us that this is an issue, right? They already told us that in this biosecurity world, your personal freedoms may come secondary, guys. And we already had evidence that that works in the last 4 years. Also, what's required is a singularity of mind, that consensus mentality of the beehive. So the bee says jump and you say how high. That's required in order for us to be able to pretend that this is the only viable solution. The World Economic Forum called this, we're pursuing a centrist geopolitics. So centrist geopolitics. So centralized mindset of geographical policies, politics, geopolitics. Basically global. This is global. Centralized, global. And the mantra that has been, and I mean has been for thousands of years and has proven itself quite, what's the word? No, I lost the word. I can think of, is this, you're either with us or you're against us. This works. This worked with the pandemic. This works. This works. This works. It's literally been the reason for genocides worldwide, is you're with us or you're against us. Polarized, dual perspectives. From where I stand, the promised land, this version of transhumanism, is going to solve our human predicaments just as GMOs solved world hunger 30 years ago. So if you believe that GMOs are here to solve world hunger, and 30 years later it hasn't, it has made it worse, then you might be one of the people that believes that transhumanism is going to save our human predicaments from climate change, from all, death, all that sort of stuff that we just don't want to touch as human beings. I think it's far more fun to have to ask questions that revolve around who we're capable of becoming. Because one narrative is we just go down this conveyor belt into whatever world the committee of they seeking to create. Another one is we seek to explore our inner states, ourselves, and discover that we're so much more than we've been told we were. We're so much more. So these are the kinds of questions that I would prefer to explore inside myself and in community. So what is reality and how do I know what's real? Whose version of reality do I choose to believe? Is it an internal reality that moves up and out and lets me know the truth of my experience? Or is it an external reality that's bombarded into me until I adopt it as my own, despite the conflict inside my body? What's the role of cultural conditioning in all of this? Of whose version of the story is the one that I want to hear? So if I'm fundamentally committed to CBC News, that's the version of the story that I'm going to want to continue to sustain because it's who I've always been. Who has access to truth and who is intentionally kept from it? Why? What are the benefits for all of us in facing our own internal truth? What is a human being? How do you know? So this is the great taking that I was talking about. And if you're not familiar with this, this is ugly, ugly stuff. So this book is available for free. This beautiful man has interviews on YouTube that are explaining what this actually is and how it works. The essence of this great taking, and I take this as sort of a conclusionary statement because that's exactly what's happening. It's the great taking at all logical levels when you think about the structure of thought. The taking of our bodies, the taking of our behaviors, the taking of our strategies of who we believe ourselves to be, and ultimately our choices to become. So this specific book is about the taking of the physical assets. So one way that they're intending to force people into these long, big 15-minute city buildings is by taking our assets, is by taking away our capacity to provide for our families. Nasty stuff. So in the face of this whole thing, because this is happening, it's like this is happening. In the face of it all, now what? That's the question that I'm interested in. It's like noticing that all of this is happening and then coming to the choice point of the moment that I'm in and noticing how else might I choose to live my life today in a meaningful, expansive way that invites the full measure of the I am that I am to emerge and to thrive. To notice all of this that's happening and in the face of it go, I choose my meaningful life. So who else might I choose to become in the face of it all? If I don't keep my attention on who I'm becoming, I succumb to the narratives of another. So many sides are based on fear, right? Like the polarization only works where fear and shame is present in both narratives. So I invite you to consider that this is not about polarizing, this is about unifying. So how do we now unify inside ourselves the elements of self that we hold as separate? That's a far more interesting conversation. And that allows us to redefine ourselves and what we are as human beings. And it allows us to find a new platform to stand on, a new platform to build from and to create from. And that platform is internal referencing, meaning that I know the truth from the impulses of my body. So now I have to clear the static of all the cultural conditioning, of all the stories, of all the blah, blah, blahs, of all the diseases, of all the information that has already moved through my body so that I hear and can calibrate for truth. Because my body, your body, is designed to calibrate for truth. So all you have to do is discover how to do that for yourself. And part of that is that redefinition of what is the body and what is a human being. I believe the time has come to redefine ourselves, like I said, and to do so experientially, because you cannot redefine what you are without first having the experience. It doesn't matter what the Buddhists are saying. It doesn't matter what, it doesn't matter what the science is saying, right? Nassim Haramein science and Greg Braden science around I am God eternal. It doesn't matter what all of that is saying. If I don't have the experience of that in and through my body, I will always dismiss it as woo-woo or as, that's their experience. It's not real. Look at all these experts telling me what reality is. And so I will ingest their worldview as real when my experience is not that. So it's, back to the body. It always comes back to the body. It always comes back to what is a human being, the very things that are seeking to be hijacked in this moment through this biodigital convergence. So an alternative mindset, and this is the one that most of the women here subscribe to, is the well systems paradigm. If I don't decloak to myself the truth of my experience, if I don't notice what's actually getting in the way, if I don't notice what I'm carrying that no longer serves me, I become bogged down with information and content and seeking to sift through that information and content in a linear, logical, predictable, manageable way. The problem with that is that if it was working, we wouldn't be in the world that we're in today. This way of living teaches us how to come back to our roots, teaches us how to come back to being women who are deeply connected to our internal, impulsive cues, right? So our instincts are the ones that must guide us into the creation of the new world, because as the global governance people are creating that world, and many people will die, there are others that are creating an alternative to that world. An alternative where we get to expand our definition of what is a human being in a way that leaves us powerful in the creation of our meaningful life. So if you start with anything, my encouragement is always to start with the Decloaking and Living Authentically audio files. The first CD is free, but then you can access the rest of it for like under $200. And you can do that in the privacy of your own home. You can connect with me for a one-on-one, or we can delve into a group intensive, which is where the fun is. I just want to tell you a little bit about what's coming up this summer and fall, that experiences that I'm creating. I will be creating more of these experiences because I find I'm enlivened by talking about these things. So I don't know what the next one's going to be. I think I made reference to it somewhere, a part 2 to this. So that'll be something that I'll create. And then I don't know what else, but I am creating experiences where we can actually delve into what gets in the way. So the next one coming up is a 2-day conversation around how we become resourceful and resilient in the face of massive fear on the global collective. And then I also have a transforming through fear. So awakening the body through your fire, because it is women's fire that has been shunned and shamed and locked in a tight little box for eons. So this is an in-person experience in Ottawa. So for those of you that are in Ottawa, join me. And ultimately in September, there's going to be Decloaking and Living Authentically, which is the starting point for the transformation that I believe is mandatory. It's absolutely necessary if we are to not succumb to the narratives of the biodigital world. So otherwise, I have monthly conversations that I facilitate where you get to come in and touch base and experience for yourself what it's like to actually unveil some of the stuff and discover an alternative mindset to subscribe to as you unsubscribe from the old. Like, what do you now choose to subscribe to? So I think that's it. I'm going to press the next button. So just talk to me. If there's anything you're curious about, just talk to me. And also, let's delve into the Q&A portion and see, what are you curious about? What are you interested in? What stood out for you? What are the challenges that remain for you? What are some unanswered questions that you might have? I mean, anything goes. Like, there's nothing taboo here. It's like anything goes. So let's do that.